and that the guy whose wife works in a big company for AIG, Senator Dodd, was saying he was against the bailout money being used for bonuses when he actually wrote the clause to mirror Obama. Then they started turning against each other, saying, well, you told me to, well, you told me to. So speak to that. So speak to false flag terror and the big scandals. If the public's mad at 165 mil, what about 10 trill? And how we further get the word out and derail this guy.
Yeah, maybe we can start with this AIG. Obama has a glass jaw if you're attacking him from the left. And that's the key. When Obama had a health care summit, he wanted to ban the people who are going to advocate a single payer, basically Medicare for all or Medicare for anybody who wants it. And they threatened to picket him. And he said, oh, no, I can't do that. I've got to let you in. He didn't let them speak, but he let them in. Then on AIG, we had Bernanke in the Congress at the Senate hearings saying, I won't tell you who got the AIG money. This means the big money, the tens of billions. And then you had Cohn, K-O-H-N, this guy who's Bernanke's deputy, a couple of days later at the Dodd-Shelby committee, and he wouldn't tell who got the money. And that then exploded, and Obama had to cave on that one. So now we find that the big money of AIG, not the 160 million or 200 million of bonuses, bad as that is, but the 160 billion of derivatives bailout. Remember, this is the AIG London branch, their hedge fund, their financial products division, working with derivatives, credit default swaps, and other derivatives, collateralized debt obligations. 3 trillion of those, more than the gross national product of France and any number of other countries. And out of that money, we find that 10 or 12 billion went to Goldman Sachs, always high on the list of beneficiaries, 10 billion to Barclays Bank in Britain, 10 billion to Deutsche Bank in Berlin and Frankfurt, and 10 billion to Société Générale of France. So foreign bankers that we know of get 30 to 35 billion of U.S. taxpayer funds in order to bail out their derivatives holdings. Now, you'd have to say, if Gordon Brown and Sarkozy and Madame Merkel are so concerned about these banks in their countries, why don't they bail them out and let the U.S. Alone on this? But you see, these are globalized investment bankers, and that's how they operate. So AIG, the business with the bonuses is really a diversion, but it's also the fact that the culture, I think, is changing. And this has been, I think, in many ways a watershed for Obama, that people are beginning to sense, some of the smarter people are sensing that Obama's a tool of Wall Street. I'll give you some examples. Paul Krugman, okay, Princeton Nobel Prize, he says the zombie ideas have won, and Obama is going with a cash for trash program. This is the Geithner bailout, the second trillion announced on earlier this week by Geithner. So zombie ideas, cash for trash, and it's all the same stuff from Paulson recycled now for the third time, says Krugman. Galbraith at the University of Texas, he says this is a massively corrupted banking system, and he basically says seize the zombie banks and put them out of existence, and he says increase Social Security pensions by 1/3. Now, that's a step in the right direction. I would say double Social Security pensions, because you're not going to have a 401k and you're not going to have anything else. So that's already something.
And by the way, the $10 trillion, and Bloomberg's reported this, would pay off 90% of the mortgages, massively increase Social Security because of inflation. So we always hear on the fake right-wing radio, oh, it's all about welfare. That's where all the money goes. That's a tiny percent. Everything is going to the offshore New World Order banks, who literally, as you said, are sucking the entire world dry and trying to put carbon taxes on industry to further enslave them, paid directly to the bankers. I mean, this is such an outrageous plan. How will they get away with it, as it's already stalling, without staging terror attacks? Webster, I feel one. I feel one. Talk about that. I think they're about to hit us hard.
Well, we're going to have this. We're going to have a 20 to 30 foot fireball here at the Key Bridge across the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. Now, I don't know whether this has gone off yet or not, but they say it's for a film. But people driving along, the George Washington Parkway on one side of the Whitehurst Freeway on the other here in D.C., they're going to see a 30-foot fireball in the middle of the Potomac. It's supposed to be some ships, some small boats, and one of them blows up as part of a movie, I think, for CBS. Yes, that's very, very much in the air. Anyway, these left liberals, Krugman, Galbraith, Grider of Rolling Stone, typical left liberal.
He wrote a book attacking us. He wrote a book last year attacking us, saying there's no new world order. Now he writes a thing called The Big Takeover and says it's a power takeover by the banks. What is that flip-flop?
Well, what they're trying to do, of course, many of these people, Grider, I think, is a good example. He's trying to have a fake opposition that will be controlled, so there won't be a real opposition. You can also look at Madame Stasinopoulos Huffington, right, the rich elitist oligarch out there in California with her Huffington Post website. She's attempting to become the fake controlled opposition to the Obama regime, and I guess there are various Air America personalities in the same ballpark. Frank Rich of the New York Times says that AIG is Obama's Katrina. So you see the idea. Yes, I think there is a grave danger. We know that with Obama in office, the door to false flag is now wide open, and you've got, for example, they're meddling in Sudan. They have indicted General Bashir of Sudan for crimes against humanity, basically genocide, and you've got this venomous vampire, Susan Rice, at the United Nations. This is an apostle of extermination. This is a woman who was implicated in the great genocide in the Rwanda, Burundi, and Congo, Uganda area in the mid-90s, and now she's back. She's very influential with Obama, and she's leading the charge in the United Nations to overthrow the regime in Sudan. And of course,
and you predicted that a year ago. You predicted that they need that black face to go into Africa. Going back to false flag terror and continue with your analysis, do we get the word out about false flag terror? I mean, what are your ideas to counter this? Because clearly they need this to continue the agenda, and every time their agenda stalls, they stage terror attacks.
Yeah, look at the question of Sudan. I mean, what I think is likely is that the next round, whenever that is, will come equipped with different targets, naturally. I think Sudan is a pretty big target right now.
We see the Pentagon already saying that African terrorists are going to hit our bases in Africa or the Middle East or the U.S. So I agree with you. I see them saying, now we got to invade Africa. The terrorists hit us.
And, of course, the secret is that China gets 6, 7, 8% of their oil supply from Sudan, and that's the reason. It's got nothing to do with humanitarian stuff. You also have to remember the reason that the genocide, there is undoubtedly genocide in the Sahel region of Africa, all across the southern edge of the Sahara, but that's because there's a world economic depression. What do you think happened to those guys when the price of gasoline went to of oil went to $150 a gallon? I mean, they've got to have gasoline there too, right? If their trucks run on the same thing as tractors or trucks anywhere else. So the depression, and I think that's also got something to do with Mexico. The internal collapse of Mexico is also it's a feature of a world economic breakdown crisis and global economic collapse, which is going on, and it's not influenced by...
Well, we've seen Iceland fall, we've seen Argentina fall, we've seen 3 nations fall or partially fall in Eastern Europe. Are you seeing that accelerate?
Well, I think so, and the problem is we don't know. I mean, the average for the last 10 years is that 40,000 people die in the third world every day of malnutrition, starvation, and diseases like diarrhea that can be cured for about 50 cents.
And the carbon tax, they admit, will double that.
Yeah. You can. I saw an item on the internet lately where somebody said if you try to bring Africa up to a U.S. or European standard of living, what would that mean? And some journalist says, well, you can't do that. That would be bad for the planet. In other words, you simply can't have development in Africa and South Asia if you're going to have this lunatic obsession with global warming, which of course is a pseudo-scientific fraud developed by Al Gore, not even by Al Gore, but by these circles around Prince Charles.
Club of Rome.
We're back on them. Yes, exactly. Club of Rome and all that. This guy Holdren, I want to point to somebody that he deserves more attention than he's getting. He's the White House science advisor to Obama. And he talks about something called de-development. In other words, countries that have reached the level of industrial society have to go backwards. And if you're talking about taking an industrial society and pitching it back into a post-industrial or non-industrial one, which is what is largely happening and has happened in the United States, the implications of this are genocide, because you get a situation in technical terms where the relative potential population density of the country falls below the population. So it means there's an overhang that can't be sustained of people, of us, the rest of us. Holdren talks de-development. There's an interesting article in Forbes where they talk about the Central Valley of California, right? It's one of the greatest agricultural production areas in the world. If you've ever been down there, the Imperial Valley, El Centro, California, Palm
And they
Springs,
say
California.
1 degree in temperature increase will wipe all that out when all the studies actually show it'll increase yield.
Yeah, then this is making the desert bloom, making the desert into just a tremendously valuable area of agricultural production. The commitment of the environmental fanatics and Malthusian elitists and basically genocidalists in the Obama regime is to shut down agriculture in the Central Valley of California.
Because when the banks bankrupt everything, they get to consolidate power.